I'm Elyse Archer. I'm the founder and CEO of She Sells, and you can catch me on this week's episode of The Jesse T Show.
Elyse Archer, what is going on, sister?
Jesse, I'm so excited to be here. And it's even though we're not live together, it's also cool to be hanging out with someone who's kind of my neighbor.
Right.
We just
realized we're
found out.
neighbors. Yeah. Hell yeah. We were like
I'm
20 minutes apart in terms of like where we live, which is really cool.
Very cool. Very
Yeah.
cool.
Well, thank you so much for joining the show. And I'm definitely excited. We have a common connection that saw fit to plug us in together. And ever since we started connecting, it's just been a beautiful conversation and just excited to see where the journey leads. So for those of us, give them a sneak peek to what we've been talking about. Who are you? What do you do? And tell us all about all things Elyse.
Yeah, totally. Well, I'm thrilled to be here. And I think what I do today would not indicate a lot of where I came from. So I've founded my own company in the sales and wealth creation space for women. But before that, it was an interesting journey to get here, as it is for everyone, right? So I'll give a little context. So growing up, I loved all things beauty, and I wanted to be a makeup artist for years and years. And I loved doing my makeup and my younger sisters and just pouring through beauty magazines from a really young age. But the problem was I never looked like any of the women that I saw in those magazines. And for anyone who grew up around the time I did, it was like early 90s. And so, body positivity movement hadn't started yet. And so if you were the description of beauty at that point was, stick thin, gorgeous supermodels. And so I started early on comparing myself to them. And I never felt as beautiful. I never felt pretty enough. Then, throw in some dance classes with some other girls where I was a little like thicker than them and comparing myself to my younger sister who was just naturally thin. And I didn't realize that I was setting myself up for decades of really, really hating my body and being super disconnected from it. And this does all tie in with what I do now. So I'll share that. But there was a moment, I don't know about you, Jesse, but I think we've all kind of had those moments where it's like, it was a make or break type of moment. And I remember my family had just gotten back from a trip to Paris. I was in my early teens. We just gotten back from a trip to Paris. And, aside from there being baguettes on every street corner in Paris, you also walk a lot. And so I ended up losing a little bit of weight on the trip. And I remember we were sitting as a family around the dinner table one night after getting back from this trip. And growing up, my dad and I are good friends now, and he's a dear part of my life. But he just wasn't, I didn't get the attention from him that I desired as a young girl. We'll say that. And I remember wanting so desperately to have his attention and for him to see me. And I remember that night, he looked at me at the dinner table and he said one thing that was literally just meant to be a compliment, but it changed my life. And he said, "You look good." That was it. "You look good."
Wow.
And from my dad, this man who I so desperately had wanted attention from growing up, that I felt like he saw me for the first time. And then I started I kind of took that. So my teenage brain took that to mean the smaller I get, the more worthy of love I am. Then I can get what I want. Then I can get the attention and affection I want. Go to school, start getting attention from the boys, start getting it from the girls, like everyone. And so I started that in that moment, that kicked off what would turn into a 17-year journey of an eating disorder, of hating my body and then trying so hard to fit into these molds that society says will make you happy. And so along the way, I went into sales because I'd also picked up the messaging that to be happy and to have that life, I needed to make a lot of money. And so sales was the best route I could think of. So I know part of your experience was door-to-door sales. I've done that. I've done hardcore sales. I've sold everything. But after college, went into corporate media sales, and of course, type A overachiever who wanted validation and praise really badly. I did whatever it took to be at the top of the leaderboard in that position. So I would get 4 hours of sleep a night. I would burn the candle at both ends, like run my body into the ground. And I found myself, Jesse, in my mid-20s with this life that I thought was going to make me happy. I was married. I had a 6-figure corporate career, a nice house, the BMW, active social life, but nobody knew how much I hated myself and was struggling on the inside. No one knew I was still struggling with the eating disorder, and that I was in, even though I had money, I was in constant fear and anxiety of it going away. That the man I was married to at the time was a recovering alcoholic, and there was a lot of abuse in our relationship. And so one of the blessings of this part of my life was because I had really long car drives to go visit customers, because I was doing outside sales, selling these media packages. And I would have to drive for a few hours at a time. I hated the silence of being alone with my thoughts during those car drives. And so I discovered podcasts. I was like, I got to have something to listen to. So I just stumbled upon podcasts. And I had never, I don't know how I found, I no doubt serendipity, right? It always happens for us. I stumbled into personal development podcasts. And I was like, oh my gosh, like we grew up in a very intellectual household. I was never taught any of this stuff, that I could literally change all of it if I wanted to. And so I got hooked on these concepts of personal development. And right before I turned 28, 28's always been a really magic number for me. I was born on the 28th, special things happen. It's a special number. And before I turned 28, I said, I am not available. I don't know what's on the other side of making a lot of changes in my life, but I'm not willing to let this one year, at least on this go round on the planet, this 128th year be like the rest of them were. And so I started going on this journey of releasing everything that I had built up around me up until that point, thinking that it was what I needed to do to be happy. And I got a divorce. I left the marriage. I was petrified of what the judgment would be on the other side. But I did that, and it wasn't easy or clean, but it was what was needed. I left my corporate job to go out on my own as an entrepreneur and start a sales coaching business. Finally spoke up and shared with a mentor that I was struggling with the eating disorder, and got help and healing for that. And life started to transform really fast.